We are going to use the analytical techniques of compare and contrast. So, to begin, let's read from our chapter for this episode, and it is chapter 25. We are going to be reading from verses 6 and 7, and it says the following. Proverbs 25, 6 and 7. Put not forth yourself in the presence of a king, and stand not in the place of great men, for better is it that is said unto you, Come up higher, than that you should be put lower in the presence of the prince whom your eyes have seen. And later in the Bible, Jesus is at a Pharisee's house, and he basically is re-quoting this scripture in a parable form. And this is recorded in Luke 14, verses 7 through 11, as follows. And he put forth a parable to those which were bidden. And when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them, When you are bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than you be bidden of him. And he that bade thee and him come and say to you, Give this man place, and you begin with shame to take the lowest room. But when you are bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee come, he may say unto thee, Friend, come up higher. Then you will have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with you. For whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Same principle in parable form. And when the disciples were arguing among themselves as to who was the most important, he had this response in Mark 10, verses 42 and 44. But Jesus called them to him and said unto them, You know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it not be among you. But whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister. And whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. So Jesus here, is using the analytical techniques of compare and contrast. And here is the comparison of these scriptures, the Proverbs, Luke, and Mark. There are promotions and positions of leadership. There are opportunities to receive honor, even honor before others. There are better or higher rooms at the party. So, was the distinction that he was making about which room the guest was in, or was it about how close to the host that they sat? I don't think so, because in his parable, the persons ended up in the higher room, closer to the host, and being honored before the guests. So we have to look at the contrast. Let's put two people and put them in the higher room, honored and in a position of leadership, influence, power. Person one, as he said, is exercising lordship and authority upon them, upon those under him. This is a self-seeking and self-promoting position of entitlement. And then you have person two, who is the servant leader. So once we have used our analytical techniques of compare and contrast, we need to draw a conclusion. And so, what is the distinction between these two people who may have the exact same position of leadership? Why, the distinction between these two people is as follows. One is self-seeking, self-promoting, as opposed to the servant leadership of the other? One word, it's called motivation. Now, this is something we have talked about. It's been a thread throughout our walk through the book of Proverbs. And the distinction in the Proverbs here, in this episode, is the putting themselves forward. It says, put not thyself forward in the presence of the king. Verses following the instructions found in later on in Proverbs in chapter 27:2, where it says, let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. So the distinction that Yeshua, Jesus here, was the choosing out for themselves the higher positions or the higher room or the positions of prestige, as opposed to his admonition to his disciples that they were not to lord it over others. He was having them heed the warning in Proverbs 16 verse 18, saying that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And also later on, in the same book, but in chapter 18 verses 12, it says, before destruction the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility. In Psalm 131:1, David wrote this. He said, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty, neither do I exercise myself in great matters that are too high for me. Now, multiple times it is recorded of David that he, quote, behaved himself wisely, especially during the days that he was dealing with the issues with Saul. Especially during those days. It is written of him more than just one time. He behaved himself wisely. And that is how he won the hearts of the men following him. That is how he won the favor of the people. And quite honestly, that is how he won the favor of God. Which is another subject that we've talking about, having favor with God and man. So a heart of service is what leads to honor, promotion, and position. So we can reverse engineer this argument. Leadership and position are given for a purpose. And it is that we can serve. So if you're strong, you're made strong for a purpose. Not to harm, but to protect. I'm going to show you guys on the screen here a piece of artwork. I'm going to leave it up for a while and then I will show it again at the end. This is a famous piece called The Shepherd's Call. And art historians are divided over whether this was painted by A.F. Schneck or Walter Hunt. I mean, there's a lot of debate. And in this painting here, you see a cold day. There's evidently deep snow, and it appears to be probably evening. And then there's a lost, frightened lamb, maybe even injured, helpless there in the snow. And there's a sheepdog collie that's found this little lamb, and this dog is howling for the shepherd. He's throwing his head back and howling. And he's keeping birds and probably predators at bay. Now I want you to look at this. What do you think is the most predictable creature that you would expect to be sneaking around the bush any moment after this, quote, photo, this painting was taken? What creature do you imagine is the most likely to come creeping around the edge of a bush or behind a rock? I know what I think. I think a wolf. So let's do our compare and contrast again. Comparison. The sheepdog is a collie, and the wolf. They are both the exact same creatures. They are both canines. They both have big, sharp, scary looking teeth. And they are both much higher on the food chain than the little lamb. Now for the contrast. The wolf seeks the sheep for what? Well, let's just say for his own interests. Let's just say that. Versus the sheepdog, the collie here in this painting, finds the sheep to protect the sheep. The distinction between this collie, the sheepdog, and the wolf is their motivation. The distinction is that one is using their strength and position to harm, and one is using their strength and position to protect. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the following analogy, but for those of you who haven't, I'm going to do it. What's the difference between, say, a soldier, an officer, or a good guy, broad term, and the bad guy? Let's make it very stereotypical. Even put it in whatever movie setting that you think that comes to your mind, be it a superhero or a western or whatever. Let's make them both stereotypically like really tough guys, okay? And they're armed to the teeth. Kind of like these two dogs have lots of big sharp teeth. Well, again, the distinction between the good guy and the bad guy is not their power, not their, not anything like that. It's their motivation, what they're doing with it. The distinction is that the bad guy is using their strength to harm, and the good guy is using his strength to protect, putting himself between the innocent person, or whatever it is in your scenario that helps you understand it, and then in the bad guy. So the difference is, why do you want this position of influence? Now there's a saying in an older Spider-Man series. I know I'm quoting Spider-Man, I'm sorry. But it's very good. It says, with great power comes great responsibility. It's Spider-Man, but it's good. It's basically just a modern requote of Luke 12:48, where it says, to whom much is given, much is required. Same principle. So a servant leader is how Yeshua, how Jesus described himself when he was admonishing his disciples. It is written that as he is, so are we in this world. That's found in 1 John 4:17. And so we are to be like him. And if this is how he described himself, that's what we should strive for. So much has been given to us, therefore much will be required. We have that, as the saying goes, the great responsibility. So when you, as the collie in that drawing that I showed you, or the painting, when you raise your voice and howl for the shepherd, you're going to get the attention of the wolves too. So the sheepdog, this collie, is risking something to save the lamb. The same way the soldier, the officer, the good guy, in whatever scenario that you imagined, the good guy risks something to save the innocent. David risked something to go out and stand between his flock and the lion, to stand between his flock and the bear, to stand between the children of Israel and Goliath. So in other words, the servant leader does risk backlash, attack, and in some cases even misunderstanding when they stand up for the innocent. So this is not a principle that's so simple that you're too elite, that you have arrived, that's just for the little people, nor is it too grown up for you to understand. It's not something, as I tell young people, that you have to wait till you're 30, married with 2.5 children, a dog, and a mortgage. And you're never too old to apply this principle. We all have to finish the race. As my dad says, we have to finish well. Finish well. Finish well. So you can speak up now. Regardless of what season of life you're in, you can speak up now. You can raise your voice now when you see the innocent threatened. You can be a humble servant leader now. Help your friend and acquaintances get back up after they've fallen. Be that encourager instead of being a wolf and kicking someone while they're down. So my admonition today is be the collie. Just be the collie. I'm going to show you the picture one more time. Until next time, guys. Bye-bye. Now, most of you have probably heard of the saying, "Let sleeping dogs lie." Now, this saying was first printed in 1380 by Geoffrey Chaucer. And he wrote the following: "It is not good a sleeping hound to wake." Now, let sleeping dogs lie. If you look it up online, it is described as to leave things as they are, especially to avoid restarting or rekindling an old argument, to leave disagreements in the past, avoiding interfering in a situation that is currently causing no problems but might do so as a result of such interference. Used in a sentence. Eventually, they decided it would be best to let sleeping dogs lie and not discuss the matter any further. Quote, "Since my manager did not ask me anything about my coming in late that day, I did not speak to him about it. It's best to let sleeping dogs lie." Examples for you. But Chaucer was simply restating something. He was simply saying, using a different way to say Proverbs 26, which is our chapter this episode, chapter 26, verse 17, and it says, "He that passeth by and meddleth with strife belonging not to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears." Now, we all know that no matter how sweet the pooch is, no matter how precious the baby is, that if you twist on their ears, they will make you stop. Much less if you have a dog that's aggressive. But there is a similar or related saying. It's kind of like if you hold in a snake, it's hard to hold on and dangerous to let go. I mean, what do you do with it? So this verse is obviously talking about needlessly or deliberately provoking an otherwise stable situation. Maybe not a good situation because maybe that dog's really mean, but it's a stable situation. So the face value interpretation of this verse is that it's talking about not forcibly inserting yourself into other people's issues that are none of your business. Busybodies, don't be one. Just saying. You will save yourself much wasted time and effort, as well as growling, scratches, and even sometimes some bloodletting. Just don't be one. Don't do it. Bad idea. Just saying. So that's the face value meaning. And sure, we could all tell stories that are funny after it happened, to where either we or someone we know did or said something that would inevitably cause conflict, and then the inevitable happened. But there is a particular application to this verse that I want to make today. Okay, we're going to have two dogs. Metaphorical dogs today, all right? And these two dogs can be unmercifully vicious. They're wild. Okay, you following me so far? And it is not humanly possible to tame these two dogs. They are like junkyard dogs. They're mean, and they will rip you into ribbons if provoked. Now, these two dogs have names. And I'm going to tell you what they are. The name of one is your past, and the name of the other is your future. So you might have a spotless past, and you might have a shining, bright future. Good for you. Good for you. No, and I'm not being sarcastic. Good for you. But I would guess that most of us have either done something themselves in the past that they regret, or someone has done something to you that was so harmful and so damaging that there is no human way for resolution. Now, if you want, you can twist and yank on the past's ears, dwell on regret, if I had, if they had, if this, if that, on and on. And dwelling on things that you have no control over is the same as stomping on that junkyard dog's tail. The tail of the dog that you can't control. So if you want to twist and yank on the future's ears, you're going to have a problem too. Because if you stress or worry about this or that could happen, that hasn't yet, and you can agonize and be fearful, things that are only in God's hands. Now, one of our presidents that was assassinated was President Garfield. And he was shot by someone who was disappointed that they didn't get a cabinet position or something along those lines. And he wasn't killed immediately, and he lived for something around 2 months or so. And the bullet had to come out, because in most cases that would have caused led to lead poisoning. But it wasn't the bullet that killed him in reality. What killed him in reality was the fact that they